here we are again. It is now, I believe, our 19th, I think it is, question and answer session. And for those of you who are watching only to see Finn, I hate to say it, he's off at the moment enjoying somebody's or making other people enjoy their 70th birthday party. So I'll try and add some footage at the end. If you're just watching our Tank Museum question and answer session to see Finn. Today it's blazingly hot here. We've just finished our Saturday of our Tiger Day at the Tank Museum, and I've whipped back at the end of the day to get this question and answer session done. So again, if you know all the format, you'll know the format, but basically I'm answering some questions that people have either put in the comments or have sent in by email, and I try and answer those. And I also, as I always say, try and flog you some stuff that we've got for sale on our online shop. So go to the Tank Museum website, there you'll see the online shop and all these products there are listed. And that is because even though we are open to the public, we had Tiger Day today, and it was interesting. It was very weird for the staff because we have to limit the numbers because of COVID. And that is very weird, where we've normally got a packed site, lots and lots of people. We had to limit it to about 500-600 people, I think we had. Everyone wearing face masks, keeping social distancing. It went very well from our point of view, the Tiger ran, but it's just so odd not seeing the normal numbers we get. And as you can imagine, for an independent charity, that's why we like selling these things online. And thank you for all of those who've been buying stuff, because it really is important to us, because it has helped us keep going, pay staff, bring more staff back in, and look after the collection, which is what we're there to do. So on with our questions. So I've got a number of questions. I'll drop in some of the products we've got here as well, but some bits and pieces that have come in. Nick HTK says his question was, what kind of hearing and eye protection did tank crews wear? Interestingly, we have a case in our tank story hall which has in it some of the very first goggles that belonged to one of the first tank crewmen, and also a little tin that you open, and in it are some ear defenders that he wore going into the very first tank attack. And they look just like those little foam ear defenders you pop in your ear canal to this day. What they're made of, I'm not too sure. I'm not sure we want to handle them that much either, but they're in their little original tin box. They were either privately purchased or issued to soldiers to block the ear, to again just sort of lessen the amount of noise that was in those first tanks. And again, the goggles, you'll see quite often they're privately purchased. Some of them were these ones where they actually tried, it was little slits in on a metal shield. Other ones later, of course, they issue the tank crews with these face shields, which again have a leather over a metal frame with below some chainmail hanging down. The actual eyepieces, again, are slits in the metal. There's no actual glass in there. And when they were issued to you, there was a little paper label on there, and it says bend to the shape of your face. So you actually bent it so it actually suited you. And again, we've got accounts of some of the First World War tank crewmen saying they didn't really like these because, again, that sense of claustrophobia. Weirdly, again, what with COVID-19 all today, very hot day, everybody with face masks on, etc., you start getting that sense of why in a hot, confined space you might not like having something over your eyes and your face as well at the same time. You can see in the 30s they're issuing, certainly in the British military, these teardrop-shaped goggles that go around. They are issued with, in the pack, in the box they come in, you can actually get coloured filters. So again, for night driving and other things, you actually put a different teardrop shape that goes and slots in to the metal framework. And of course, you look through different periods, you'll see that up to the modern era where they've got ballistic plastics, they've got all sorts of things. Again, for Afghanistan and Iraq, as in the ground troops, they were being issued with certain types of sunglasses and protective eyewear, which again was important for the troops to be able to use, and gives a level of protection. It'll never stop everything coming your way. Why is it so important? Because if you go in certain crew positions in armoured vehicles, however cleverly the vehicle's designed, some of them inevitably seem to throw material from the tracks. It seems to suck up and go into your face or into your eyes. And of course, if you become blinded or you can't see, or the fatigue of, again, concentrating, looking through lenses, etc., that's where they're trying to protect the eyes, keep the muck out, and obviously if there is a chance of stopping anything that might damage the eye, getting in there. So again, crew protection, these are all those things that is constantly being looked at, constantly being worked on. What works at one time might not work another time as well. That's another thing to bear in mind as well, because I just noticed they've done a report on fire protection equipment that might be worn inside a tank, but they're also saying at the same time there is a point beyond which that you can wear those layers. That might be fine on a winter day, but on a day like today when it's hot, sweaty, sticky, if you're adding extra layers, you might be degrading the performance of that particular person. So again, same as ear protection, sometimes you need to hear things about spatial awareness. So yes, protect from the sense of keeping the crewmen's ears safe and not damaged by the noise, but in combat, sometimes those extra noises, being able to listen in, knowing what's going on, hearing the engine note, etc., these are all going to be things that are really important. Right, next question. This one brings up a shop product I can sell you. Someone was asking about the Tigerfibel. Now, I mentioned it before. I asked the question. This is a manual that's put together, that's issued to German Tiger crews. And looking at this, I can tell you a little bit more information behind it. A guy called Oberstleutnant Hans Christian, he was responsible for tank training in the German Panzerwurf, the bit of the German military that's looking after the tank crews. And he, when the Tiger is coming into service, he talks to one of his compatriots who's a junior lieutenant, Lieutenant Joseph von Gotz. And this young man suggests that they cooperate together, but they come up with the idea, let's find, and his phrase is they wanted to call it a Tiger primer, some way of creating the equivalent of a manual for the new tank crews who are now being formed for these new heavy Tiger tank units. What can we do? What can we come up with as a way of being able to teach them about the tank in a manner that they're going to remember? Now, if you're a German or you know about German literature, etc., if you look, when Hitler comes to power, most German publications are still being printed in a really heavy Gothic type. It's very surprising to many people when you look at that, because it almost looks medieval, the way that their typeface is. Of course, you've got all the Bauhaus artists, the very modernist artists, who are coming up with very new ways of doing things. And just as in Britain, people like Eric Gill, who's coming up with a sans serif system of lettering that was used by London Underground, that again at the time very, very modern. Actually, Hitler doesn't like the Bauhaus lot because he considers them Jewish, he considers them too modernistic, but their typography that goes into service with the German military is much plainer, clearer, easily legible than that earlier German Gothic typeface. So there's one of those weird contradictions in the Nazi era. And they're also looking at how can we do things in a manner that is very, what for, again, a very authoritarian regime, etc., very un-Germanic, coming up with, as they do, humorous, it's got to be eye-catching, it's got to be easy to understand. They use humorous verse in there, they use naughty pictures, young ladies having a shower, etc., anything to attract the guy's attention. And when you look at some of the other German literature, this is a real step change, and much to everybody at the time's surprise, it's accepted. The German high command, the Guderian involved, etc., they are the ones that are saying, actually, no, this is a good idea, and it's put forward. All these little ditties that have been written, 2 artists involved in that are actually serving tank crewmen, drawings by Obergefreiter Gessinger was one of them, and Unteroffizier Wagner was another one. They're doing these little line drawings that are helping. They're coming up as well, mainly by Glattergotz is coming up with some of these little jargons, rhymes, etc. And they're using the language of the troops as well, putting this all together in a manual that comes out in the German training manual series. It comes out as D656/27, and that's what we now know as a Tigerfibel. And it becomes a user-friendly training manual with lots of little mottos, little rhymes to try and make you understand or use the equipment in the best manner. And that I just found really interesting. Printed, by the way, by Eisner Verlag Berlin, offset litho printing, so there's colour in there, the way they're doing it. And it's actually published in the autumn of 1943. The Tigers are really starting, the units are starting being formed in the spring of 43, but there's a series, as the tanks are ready, series of units being made. And again, I asked that question, was it really used? Was it out there? Yes, it turns out, again, the evidence is it was well liked and copied, of course. Now we're looking at perhaps republishing and translating the Pantherfibel, which followed in the Tigerfibel's wake. So there's another one of these little booklets, same idea, that's done for the Panther tank. And I say all that as well because we've just managed to get back in stock copies. So this is the originals, about this big, very small, and what we've got here is, again, basically it's a copy of the Tigerfibel translated, so you can read through all those little mottos. And again, there's things in there, I've mentioned it I think before, things in here as well which are really useful things for a crew member to know. So for example, they're saying in there, will the ground be harder, or how do you test if the ground's hard enough to take the weight of a tanker, of a Tiger tank over it? What they suggest in there that you do is, as a tank crewman, you stand on one leg on the ground, your mate jumps on the back. If you go into the soil more than an inch, the ground is way too soft for a Tiger tank to cross. So little things like that, little nuggets about how you might be able to use the tank, as well as all the cartoons and everything that are in there. So anyway, I hope that answers. That was a couple of people had been asking about the Tigerfibel. I'd mentioned it earlier. We've now got it back in stock, so there's your you can go and get your own one there. There was also another document, by the way, that was done about the same time, which they aimed at higher authority, and it's basically a list, and it's a document that's got what they've called 25 points for the use or the engagement of the Tiger tank. And that's another interesting document, because what they're really trying to do is get out to the people that might be using the Tiger or wanting to use the Tiger. This is what it's there for, this is what we intend it for, don't go and waste it, don't use it for the wrong types of reasons. And again, if you read all the historical accounts of the employment of the heavy tank battalions, the Tiger ones, that's another one of those areas where that trying to get that message across. You can see why people like Guderian and the Panzerwolf commanders are saying, you know, don't start using it for the wrong reasons and wasting this amazingly important new asset we've got. So anyway, there we go, Tigerfibel. Let's have a look at another one. Bostic Bricks asks the question, would a Cromwell take out a Tiger from the front? Now, the Cromwell is fitted with the British 75mm quick firing gun. That is basically almost like a bored out 6-pounder gun, so we could fire the better ammunition the Americans were making, which was a better high explosive. It still has an armour piercing round that has a penetration not as good as the actual 6-pounder, but that's a gun fitted on the tank you're mentioning here, the Cromwell. It will go through the AP, the armour piercing round fired from that 75mm quick firing British version of the gun that's fitted on the Cromwell, will go through about 68mm of armour at about, I think we've got there 500 yards or 400 metres. If you're looking at that and you think about it, actually the front plate of a Tiger is 10 centimetres thick. So you're looking there at 1,000mm. You are not, sorry, 100mm, you are not going to go through that with your 75mm armour piercing. Now that doesn't mean to say a Cromwell is not going to be able to knock out a Tiger tank, because of course you can disable it, a mobility kill, you can knock out its track, you can do all sorts of things. And again, back to this idea that everything has to be absolutely black and white. You may cause the crew to abandon the tank. You may do all sorts of things. Very, very few people want to sit in a tank if you've got them actually immobile. So there's all sorts of other things you may do. So just this idea that a Cromwell is not going to ever be able to stop a Tiger tank, stop there, because there's an awful lot of other ways. And of course, as you say, the question is from the front, but yes, you get round to the side and you may well get a penetration. So other ways you can approach this. Robert Rivet and Jake Hope and a couple of other people asked these questions about, you know, battleships firing at tanks or tanks firing at battleships. If you look, 1940, there's a couple of photographs that the German propaganda companies were really hot on. They were taking photographs of a German tank with on the side of it, they'd got, you know, their sort of like kill marks and everything. Little destroyer with a line through. That was because, again, they engaged from the French coast a destroyer and were claiming it. So the idea that, again, tanks engaging, Normandy, lots of other campaigns as well, where battleship or monitors or cruiser support, they're firing at targets. Don't kid yourself, they are not that accurate to be aiming at an individual tank. But when you've got, for example, off the Normandy coast, you've got Warspite, you've got a number of ships there, major battleships, 15-inch guns firing inland to add to the effect. These are, again, back to, look at the German accounts. They're not even sure where sometimes a shell fire is coming from, but a 15-inch shell causes a massive amount of damage. Whether it went anywhere near a tank, it's still going to actually affect the people on the receiving end. So the idea, I was reading somewhere about, you know, sort of the fact as the gun heated up, it was creeping and almost following tanks. The chances of actually aiming at any individual, it will be an area bombardment weapon, but it will have its effect, naval gunfire that way. And of course, you know, that's another one of those things, you know, look at D-Day. A lot of those cruisers, destroyers were going very close to purposely try and target some of the coastal defences that were there. So of course, you know, the idea of using your naval firepower to support the guys on land and moving inland, you know, this is nothing new. This is something that's been really quite an important issue for quite some time. No doubt some of you will come back with individual stories about where perhaps certain tanks may well have been knocked out in Normandy by naval gunfire, but you know, somebody else asked a question about turned over tanks. There's a number of photographs of Tigers that were turned over during the Goodwood campaign and earlier on Totalised and some of the other major campaigns where there was medium and heavy bomber support, because then you're getting the size of bombs, just like that 15-inch shell, that can literally flip a tank over by the force of its blast. Right, what else we got? We've got here, Mark Donald says he ordered one of our little Commander Bear teddy bear things for his brother's upcoming baby. Good luck with all that. And here's another suggestion for some of you. If you're not quite sure who you should be buying this stuff for, because it looks a little bit of self-indulgent, so if you've got family coming or there's youngsters, why not start buying a few things to salt away in the attic ready for them? You know, we all fancy the idea of the train set, maybe one or two nice models, or you know, something a little bit special that we're going to put aside for when they're old enough to start playing with. And of course, if they don't go down that route and they're not the slightest bit interested, you've still got that rather nice little thing that you might want to have a play with yourself and everything. So Mark McDonald, well done for Mark Donald, well done for ordering the bear. But what are those other things you might start salting away for when he grows up, you know, when you can start engaging as that special uncle sort of role, you know. So there's another idea for some of you. And of course, if you are thinking of buying things, why not come to the Tank Museum's wonderful shop where we've got some nice things I'll tell you about in a moment. Now, I'm going to say this completely wrong. Is it Diadzi Tribu? That sounds completely wrong, doesn't it? So my apologies there. But he's emailed all the way from Brazil to say the Tank Museum's got him interested in tanks. So well done following all that up. And it's interesting seeing where all these emails coming from all around the world. Isn't it funny how that little fraternity, and we had it today at the Tiger Day, Not so many foreign visitors because of the nature of the travel at the moment, but again there was a number of nationalities there all talking the same language, their enthusiasm about tanks. So again, here's another one of these interesting ones where it gets going. So in Brazil, I hope you're enjoying these, and I hope you're learning things all the time and enjoying the subject matter. Viking 123, Schurston's Progress, he mentions. The third volume, I couldn't remember, of Siegfried Sassoon's memoirs, Schurston's Progress. I remember that one. We've got the second one, his first one, Memoirs of a Fox Hunting Man. Second one we have for sale at the moment in the shop, beautiful illustrations by Barnett Friedman. That's his wonderful First World War account, so I'd recommend it. And thank you, Viking 123, for reminding us what the third one was. And at this particular moment in time, you can hear it in my voice, I've been yakking all day talking to people at the Tank Museum. So this gives me an excuse, and I'm doing this only, because I also want to prove to you that the Tank Museum products do work. Here's one of these key rings you can buy from us. And here, getting nicely warm in the sunshine, is a bottle of Little Willie beer. And just to prove to you, nothing to do with me and my own self-indulgence, of course. So it works, it's a key ring. And you can get your nice official pint glass with the Tank Museum logo on. And thank you, by the way, I've seen you, a couple of you have been posting pictures of you sitting there drinking this. I'm going to let it go down in a second. Don't tell me off for pouring it all wrong, I'm in a hurry and on camera. I'll just leave that there a second, and it'll, I will be testing it for you so that you can be absolutely assured that when you buy any beers from the Tank Museum, the curator has dutifully tasted them and made sure that they're okay and they're not going to kill you or anything nasty that way. And it is, excuse my sweating here, blazingly hot at the moment. And as G.K. Chesterton said, thirst is a dangerous thing in a man, and he was a great spiritual writer, and I think we should follow his advice. So as I'm sitting here at the moment, I'll just take a quick slurp. Probably not a good idea to let it be stand in the sun too long and get a bit warm, but it's still, hits the spot. So again, if you fancy a little bit of Little Willie, you can buy it from the shop. Right, let's get on with some other questions. Where did we get to? I was over the page, wasn't I? Charles Flint sent us a nice message. He said when he was 7, he couldn't imagine playing with Lego when he was 67. Or 60 plus, sorry, I'm giving you too many years there. And he had great fun, and actually gave us some lovely comments about constructing one of these, I think he got the Tiger set, one of these Kobe, which is using very similar bricks that I think is pretty much the same as Lego. He put that together and said about the great pleasure of a man in his 60s suddenly making something again. So thanks for saying that. You can read his comment in our comments on the last Tank question and answers. And I say all that because there is a pleasure in actually creating something, putting something together, making something. So there's our Kobe one there. But I draws my attention to, for very simple ones you might want to do, and again, perfect for having a go with the kids or yourself on your own. We've got these kits here, very simple wooden ones. There's wooden dowels in there. You can put together wood and MDF, and there you can make yourself a really simple First World War tank shape. It smells good, it's got that lovely wood smell to it. And paint it, do whatever you like. We get kids that do it at the Tank Museum, and there we've got a turreted tank that again you can put together one of those kits made in bits of wood, and I think the side pieces there are MDF as well, and there's little wooden dowels, so you don't need much to be able to do it. But if you fancy having a go at those, again, have a look. We've got all those lovely models we're selling in the shop, but part of that thing is I know some of the older people watching, I say older, I'm one of those older people watching, what are those things that we did when we were younger? Have we got a bit more time on our hand? Or even if we haven't, what are the things that's going to take us away from all the stresses and strains? And it is amazing the number of people that have actually been coming back and commented saying, I've made a model again. I didn't think, after all these years I'd do that. And thank you as well. Even that Kobe model there with these brick ones, the satisfaction of creating something. And again, if you've got the family, all the other people you can do that with. So thank you, Charles Flint, for pointing that one out. Kev81 says the question. He says, I'm just going to, Kev81, I really don't think we should be letting it get any warmer. He asked the question, did the Germans use glycol in armoured bins like the Allies did? So if you remember, again, we've talked about before, when the Sherman, everyone called it Tommy Cooker, all these things, it was mainly ammunition fires, not the fuel that was going up. Hence, they put those extra applique armour plates on the side of the Shermans to armour plate extra where the ammunition's being stored inside, so give it a little bit of extra level of protection. And then what's called wet stowage, they create bins with a fluid around the outside of the bins. The ammunition is kept inside, and they put in things like glycol. Doesn't freeze, it's a sort of fire suppressant in essence. It's so anything like a bit of hot metal that might penetrate the bin, the glycol should stop it, the water equivalent should stop it, take the heat away and stop a secondary fire. And that actually is effective statistically. They show that in the Sherman tanks, and other tanks are using that system in the equivalent of, and then they're also looking at armoured bins as well. So you have a level of protection of the ammunition even when it's inside the vehicle. Now the Germans don't copy, as far as I can see anywhere, wet stowage in the same way, but they do have armoured shutters and ways of trying to protect the bins where ammunition is stowed. So if you look on the Tiger, there's actual folding metal shutters that go over some of the ammunition storage, but they don't go into it in the same way that we certainly do in the Western Allies. And again, if you look at things like the King Tiger, where there's ammunition stowed in the back of that shape of the King Tiger turret, as well as in the main hull, look at the thickness of armour around it. It's still very, very thick. So again, I think they're looking at, actually they've got enough armour protection to not worry about so much about putting extra layers around the actual ammunition. Now I've got some other questions I've put on a piece of paper here. One, Tasman 006 says, commenting on, like a lot of you did on that, when we talked about typhoon attacks and everything. A lot of times people get very worked up about that. Like I was saying last time, this is no way a criticism of the RAF or the accuracy. It's just that I think people had a perception, the level of accuracy of when they're firing those rockets from planes like the Typhoon, it's just not perhaps as accurate as we were led to believe, or we've thought subsequently. That doesn't mean to say it's not effective. But Tasman and 006, when he talks about the engagement about Michael Whitman, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I'm sorry, chum, I still think it's Joe Eakins does the business. Gaz Walsh asked the question, 6-tonner, the Vickers 6-tonner, would it have made any difference if Britain had taken that up and put it into service, so we'd had that in service for the Second World War? My thoughts there are, actually, the tank is not that radical, but it's reliable. And it's because the Soviets copied the idea of it, the Vickers 6-tonner, but they produce so many that has the effect. I personally don't think if the British Army, the numbers, even if they had taken the 6-tonner on board, the numbers they would likely to have had in service, and I keep coming back to, it's a point of emphasis at the moment, I keep saying it is in the 30s, tanks are not Britain's priorities. Chamberlain, from 34 onwards, when he starts adding funding to rearmament, it is going for the Navy and it is going for the Air Force, because those two areas he sees as the greatest priority. And strategically, no two ways about it, he's right. Only third is the Army, and even then a lot of that support is to do with aircraft, or knocking down aircraft, anti-aircraft defences, rather than tanks. So at that time, even if we had put the 6-ton Vickers export tank into service in Britain, I still don't think we would have made enough of them to make any difference. So technologically, it wasn't that they were particularly advanced, it was just that they were really good and reliable, and they were a real sound basis for other countries to start a tank industry, especially, as we know, the Soviet Union, Russia, they're the ones that are actually building huge numbers based on the Vickers 6-tonner. That's what the difference is there. What else do we want to go? Dave Jones, in very, very questionable language, is making the point that I'm saying the word cupola It should be, of course, cupola is how you actually pronounce that word. In other words, the domed bit on the top of a commander's cupola, it should be, not cupola, I believe I've been saying in the past. So thank you for that, pointing that out, but you might want to do it in more restrained language next time. Right, what other ones do we want to talk about? So another question I just thought I would, it wasn't really one that people have commented on. They haven't necessarily asked this question before, but about Berlin camo. And I just thought Berlin camouflage was put on a number of British vehicles in Berlin where we had an armoured unit in the Cold War. And just out of interest, you know, it's a very effective system. It's done in blocks, it breaks up the outline of a tank, and it's been recently repainted on a couple of Challenger 2 tanks for the Royal Tank Regiment. And everyone made a lot of comments about it, but it's actually quite an old scheme when you think about it. But it's very effective for urban use of armoured vehicles because it means that they are hidden a lot better than, again, that traditional green colour that we always think of, or perhaps a countryside camouflage, you know, as if they're going to be out in the middle of nowhere. And this was a letter written by Claydon Dawkes, when he was a young lieutenant colonel in charge of the Berlin Brigade. And I'll just read some of this to you because he explains, he's the guy who comes up with this scheme. While I was commanding the independent armoured squadron in Berlin between 82 and 83, it dawned on me that it was illogical to continue to paint our vehicles in the NATO deep bronze green, developed essentially for a rural environment. Unlike the countryside, urban characteristics demanded vertical and horizontal lines to conform with walls, buildings, lampposts, windows and door frames, masts and TV aerials, etc. In addition, buildings are variously stone-coloured, brick or dirty grey. I learnt that battleships in World War II had adopted a disrupted pattern of straight-lined camouflage. I paint landscapes in watercolours and so had, I suppose, an eye for what we were about. I was also aware that all tank gunners and infantry anti-tank gunners are taught with targets which are monochrome dark silhouettes. I had silhouettes of tanks in white card cut out, each about 2 foot long, and placed in my office windows. I then experimented with designs and progressed to painting 2 tanks. These were trialled by the squadron secretly. We then invited the brigade commander, GOC and CNC, who at the time, by the way, was Bagnall, who's another very interesting character, to view them in urban surroundings and in rural areas. They approved, and all Berlin vehicles henceforth were painted to my design, including B vehicles. That means soft skin, in other words, not just the armoured ones. The United States took the design to the USA and copied it, and the WP also adopted it in Eastern Europe. The secret was large squares of the 3 colours, white, brown and grey, irrespective of the size of the vehicle. The only time the Berlin vehicles reverted to the traditional green was with the arrival of a Household Cavalry Division GOC, who thought it was unsuitable for parades. When he left, they all repainted it in my camouflage. For the idea and its execution, I was awarded £150. Exclamation mark. So he wrote that to the Tank Museum back in 1992. And I say that because, again, in future our conflicts, urban is bound to be there predominantly, probably a lot more than, you know, out in the greenery of the lovely English countryside type of landscape. And I mention this as well because if you're interested, have a look at the images of the Berlin camo. If you're a model maker or something, what you've got to be looking out for is pretty much they match the following RAL numbers. The white was RAL 9010, the blue-grey colour is RAL 7031, and the brown brickish colour is RAL 8025. All road wheels, idlers, sprocket and support rollers were painted black. So I thought I'd throw that one in as well because I think it's rather a nice, well, one of those interesting stories. And we've just been reusing that Berlin camouflage scheme fairly recently, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see it on more and more vehicles in the future because it helps also reset the mindset that a lot of times, certainly for British Armoured Forces, we train on Salisbury Plain, we train out in Battersea in Canada, there's going to be very few areas really like that we're likely to fight in the future, a lot of the time it's going to be urban or semi-urban. Therefore, that camouflage scheme is going to be really useful for us. Now, before I melt in all the sunshine, one more slurp of my drink here. What were the other things I hear you say that you want to know about? We have, those of you of a certain generation, remember the music to Colditz, the television series. Colditz, the game, redone by Offspray. There we go, you can pick that up from the shop. So again, if you want a board game, if you're a board game player, we have that. I've mentioned already the Kobe tank, and I know a number of people were saying about jigsaws. This is a jigsaw World War II tanks. So when it's done, you should frame it, put it up on the wall, and you can do your spotter's guide to all the Second World War tanks that they've got in there. 1,000 pieces jigsaw puzzles, so we've got that in stock now as well. Other things I can point out, I've said them before, but if you fancy your, I didn't bring out my I Love Tanks mug, but there's your Dad's Army Stupid Boy mug. We still have those nice enamel ones, so if you really want the authentic experience of burning your lips every time you have a nice cup of tea, buy one of these. I've mentioned already, if you want something to gen up on being a Tiger tank crewman, we've had the Tiger tank driving around today, as I said, and it went very well. You can buy your Tigerfibel there. I mentioned this one again. I think we have plenty of copies, and there it is, all at £3.99. Really good account. Max Hastings, the German unit, trying to make its way up to Normandy to fight the Allied invasion, and all the hassle they had on the route trying to get there. Again, everyone different levels. This one just on taking you through some of the key battles in the Second World War. It's done by the same lot that did our little tank spotter's guide, so Offspray in there. But again, simple page chapters, as it were, on all those key battles in the Second World War. So again, for somebody there. And I've also mentioned before, if you're interested in how the military teach about vehicles and the manual you'll get with a vehicle, we've still got some of these Saracen manuals. They're the original ones given to us by the Army when the vehicle went out of service, beautifully printed, lovely illustrations, and I think it's, there we are, £4.99, so under a fiver. And I always find them just fascinating because, again, it teaches in simple language how you're supposed to be looking after a vehicle and what those things are. So that's a British Armoured Personnel Carrier, the Saracen there. And you can have the original manual, which I still find fascinating when you look through these things, because it tells you how it's used, what are the things you're supposed to maintain and look after on that sort of thing. Tea towels, I've got a couple of tea towels for you. So I think you've seen a couple of these before. We've had, oh hang on, what we got here, we have there's a Tiger tank tea towel if you're a Tiger fan. I expect we sold a few of those today. I showed you before, if you're a bit of a British tank fan, there's a nice Centurion tea towel. And also we've had done absolutely beautiful drawings, he says, wrong way up here, if I get them around the right way. These are from the original blueprints that we actually found in the bottom of a box from Vickers of First World War tanks. So here we've got some of the original drawings for a Mark IV tank there. So again, thank you if you are buying things from us, because as I said earlier, really helps us, supports us, and keeps the organisation going. So I know some of you have struggled on this long, because I promised I'll do some footage of Finn. That'll be following afterwards. As ever, keep the questions coming in. It's been a bit of a hot and sweaty day, and apologies, I'm melting here in the sunshine. It's been a long day already, so I do hope, thank you so much if we've been able to answer your question. I do hope you still enjoy what we're putting out, doing these questions and answers for you. Keep the questions coming in, you can put them on there. I can't, as I've said before, I'm not going to answer everyone, can't get round to everyone in the time available, but we'll try and keep those things going. And thank you if you've been buying things from the shop, because that really keeps us going as well. So here's to you. Here's our little Willy beer that's now quietly cooking, I'm afraid to say, in the sunshine. Oh, I nearly forgot. If you fancy your key ring, we've got some quite interesting Tank Museum key rings. First World War tank, you can't see it from that distance, but we've got a nice little rhomboid First World War tank. Hand grenade, perhaps don't take it on the aeroplane with you. Nice little Churchill tank as well, one. And again, if you want your nice little gold teddy bear, I can't quite believe it's real gold, but there's a Tank Museum teddy bear there with a Tank Museum logo on it. So if you fancy your keyring, you can buy one of those. So I've now dutifully done all the shop stock I was supposed to promote. So I will now say goodbye. Drop it. That's it. In these difficult times, obviously your support is really valued. So please do keep following us on social media, do subscribe to our channel, and if you've got the opportunity, perhaps order something from our shop, join one of our schemes like Patreon or our Friends organisation, and we'll try and keep going with giving you some content to keep you informed and entertained.